22 ordinary American boys were split into two groups by a quiet psychologist in the summer of 1954. And inside a week, they were burning each other's flags, raiding each other's cabins, and arming themselves with rocks. They were 11 and 12 years old, middle class, well-adjusted, from similar neighborhoods, similar families, similar churches. The man who put them on the bus had chosen them for a reason. They were as alike as 22 children could possibly be. None of them knew they were in an experiment. None of them knew the counselors weren't counselors. None of them knew the entire thing. The friendships and the rivalry and the war had been quietly engineered to find out one thing about the rest of us. How long does it take to turn ordinary people into enemies? The man running the camp had set aside 3 weeks to find out. He wouldn't need anything close. The year is 1954. The place is Robbers Cave State Park, 200 acres of pine and stone in the Oklahoma wilderness. A psychologist named Muzaffar Sharif has spent years preparing this study, and he has been very careful to make sure none of the children who arrive at the camp will ever know what's really happening. He selects 22 boys with surgical precision, 11 and 12 years old, the same race, the same religion, the same socioeconomic background, the same intelligence range. He screens out anyone with a difficult family, a behavioral history, or anything else that might mark a child as different. The point is to begin with 22 children as identical as he can possibly make them, because whatever happens between them next has to be impossible to blame on anything the boys brought with them. The only difference between them will be the difference Sharif creates. The boys are told they're going to summer camp. Their parents are told there's a study going on, but not the details, and they are sworn to silence. Every counselor at the camp will turn out to be a researcher or a graduate student. The groundskeeper is a researcher. The man with the clipboard is a researcher. Every overheard conversation, every observed argument, every quiet moment around the campfire for the next 3 weeks is going to be data. Sharif splits the 22 boys into two groups of 11 before any of them ever arrive. Group A is bussed up the dirt road first and given the camp to themselves for an entire week. They swim, they hike, they cook over open fires, they share tents under the stars. They become best friends in the rapid, total way only boys their age can. They invent jokes, they invent rituals, they invent a name for themselves, the Rattlers, and stencil it onto their shirts. While they are doing all of this, 11 other boys are being bussed into the same camp, kept entirely on the far side of the woods, doing the exact same things. They become best friends with each other in the exact same way. They invent their own rituals. They name themselves the Eagles and burn the letters into wood. For 7 days, each group believes they are the only boys at the camp. And then Sharif lets them find out about each other.
The first stage was simple contact. Sharif arranged for the Rattlers to stumble across the Eagles' baseball field while the Eagles were on it. Two groups of identical American boys who had never met, who shared every demographic the researcher could measure, looking at each other across a backstop. Within hours, the Rattlers were demanding the field be theirs. Within a day, both groups were lobbying the counselors for their territory. Within 2 days, they were calling each other names. Then Sharif introduced what he had always planned to introduce, a tournament. A series of competitions between the two camps. Baseball, tug-of-war, tent pitching, treasure hunts. Real prizes for the winners and absolutely nothing for the losers. Knives, medals, a trophy. The hostility escalated faster than even Sharif had expected. By the second day of competition, the Eagles were using slurs they had not used a week earlier. By the third, the Rattlers had broken into the Eagles' cabin and burned their flag. The Eagles raided back. The Rattlers raided again. They stole personal belongings. They smashed beds. They filled socks with rocks and carried them as weapons, ready in case of attack. These were the same kind of boys who, a week earlier, were 11-year-olds quietly singing with their best friends in a tent under the stars. They were now 12-year-olds plotting genuinely violent ambushes on children they had never met before this summer. Children who, on paper, were identical to them. When the researchers staged a dinner with both groups in the same hall, the boys threw food, they cursed, they walked out, they refused to sit at the same table. When asked to describe the rival group, The rattlers used words like sneaky, cheaters, stinkers. The eagles used words like cowards, babies, sissies. When asked to describe their own group, both used words like brave, friendly, tough. Within days, each side had constructed a complete mythology in which they were the heroes and the other boys were the villains. The most chilling detail in Sherif's notes is small and easy to miss. The boys started using the language of war. They divided the camp into our territory and their territory. They drew up plans. They appointed lookouts. They selected leaders not for likability, but for willingness to fight. The same social structure that produces armies was forming, fully grown, inside 12-year-olds in less than a week, over absolutely nothing. Chain of command, in-group loyalty, dehumanization of the other side, all of it. Just a flag they had named themselves, and a flag they hadn't. Then Sherif tried to undo it. He started with the most obvious idea. Just let them spend time together. Watch the same movies, eat in the same hall, shoot off the same fireworks. If hostility came from separation, surely contact would erase it. It made everything worse. The shared meals turned into food fights. The movies turned into shoving matches. Familiarity didn't dissolve their contempt for each other. It gave them more targets. What worked was something else entirely. Sherif quietly rigged the camp's water supply to fail. Both groups had to work together to find and fix the problem, or none of them drank. He arranged for the camp's only truck to break down on a hill, too heavy for either group to pull alone. He invented problems that no single side could solve, and that required both flags pulling on the same rope. It worked. Slowly at first, then all at once. Within days, the boys who had been planning raids on each other were sitting together at dinner. By the end of the camp, they asked if they could ride home on the same bus. It had taken Sherif less than 2 weeks to build the war. It took him less than 1 to undo it. The conclusion he drew became one of the most influential ideas in 20th century psychology. He called it realistic conflict theory. Groups don't hate each other because of who they are. They hate each other because of what they are competing for. Take 2 identical sets of people, give them a flag and a finite prize, and the contempt builds itself. Take the same 2 groups, give them a problem only cooperation can solve, and the contempt dissolves the same way it formed.
For 60 years, that was the story. 22 boys, 2 flags, a tournament, a war, a reconciliation. Group conflict and group reconciliation, explained on a single hillside in Oklahoma. Written into every textbook, taught in every classroom. And then a researcher named Gina Perry, the same person whose archival work had quietly broken open the Milgram legend, went into Sherif's files and started reading what he had never published. She found something Sherif had spent his whole career making sure no one would. Robber's Cave wasn't his first attempt, it was his third. A year earlier, in a place called Middle Grove, Sherif had run almost the same study with a different group of boys. He had picked them the same way, bussed them in the same way, created 2 camps, 2 identities, 2 flags. He had then tried to provoke them into the same hostility, and the boys had refused. They had figured out something was wrong. They noticed the way the counselors kept nudging them toward conflict. They formed friendships across the rival groups. They turned on the researchers instead of each other. Some of them sat the staff down, looked at them carefully, and asked whether they were being lied to. The study collapsed. It broke Sherif. He drank heavily, destroyed the data, and went home to recover. A year later, at Robber's Cave, he changed the formula. He kept the boys apart longer, so their group identities had time to fuse before contact. He made the prizes bigger. He picked even more carefully. And here is the part he never put in the published paper. His researchers actively stoked the fights. They damaged property to make it look like the rival group was responsible. They escalated grievances when things looked like they might quiet down. The natural hostility his famous study described as bubbling up on its own had been quietly engineered behind the scenes, because the version where it bubbled up on its own had already failed once. Sit with what that actually shows you. The natural conflict between the groups wasn't natural. The spontaneous hatred wasn't spontaneous. It was nudged into existence by adults with a hypothesis to confirm, hiding their hand, telling themselves it was for the greater good of science. Sharif didn't just measure how a group can be turned against another group. He demonstrated it. He was a one-man case study for his own theory, quietly pushing two flags into competition, smiling at the boys, and writing down what he had carefully arranged for them to do, which, when you stop and look at it, is something you have seen happen before, just not at a summer camp.
It's easy to watch all of this from a safe distance. 12-year-olds, a flag, a summer camp in Oklahoma 70 years ago. Surely it has nothing to do with you. But sit with what Sharif actually showed, on purpose or by accident. Take a group of people, any group, however identical to the other one, and give them a name, give them a shirt, give them a rival, give them something finite that only one side can win. And the rest builds itself in days with no ideology required. They will reach for slurs. They will rewrite history. They will rate strangers as worse than their friends and dismiss obvious facts that complicate their story. They will start to use the language of war about things that, a week earlier, they didn't know existed. Now look around. Look at the team you support, the party you vote for, the country you happen to be born in, the corner of the internet you scroll. Notice how naturally the word "we" attaches to your side and "they" attaches to the other one. Notice how easily the worst possible motive sits on the people you disagree with and how reluctantly the same motive sits on the people you don't. You weren't bussed to Robber's Cave. Nobody put a sock full of rocks in your hand. But the same machinery that turned those boys into enemies in a week is running quietly underneath the rest of your life. And there are a great many people, in this century as in the last, whose entire job is to keep that machinery running. Because the contempt between us is far too useful to ever give up. The only thing Sharif ever found that reliably switched it off was a problem too big for either side. A truck stuck on a hill. A water pipe that wouldn't flow until both groups grabbed the wrench. We live, at the moment, with a great many problems like that. Most of us are very busy pretending they belong to the other side. The boys at Robber's Cave came home not knowing they had been used. They had the excuse of being 12 and not having been told. You and I no longer have either of those excuses.